Hi, welcome to my podcast. This is Kristen Dicker. I'm from Blooming Into You, and welcome today to my first official on my own solo podcast. So today I want to introduce you a little bit to, what Blooming Into You means to me and what my coaching is about. And we'll talk a little bit about trauma and abuse, some shame, things like that, that just kind of introduce you to what trauma is, in case you don't know. It's such a buzzword right now, right? And it's important, I believe, for the awakening of the world, and to doing things in a new way, and the way we treat one another and the way we treat ourselves. And so Blooming Into You is by the name of my business and the name of my mission in life. What I want for myself and for others is for people to overcome the challenges of trauma and abuse, from childhood and from life experiences, and move forward toward a more authentic self. So you come home to your true self and you can speak your truth and live in your truth in such a healthier way, without apologizing for being here. And so trauma creates a lot of beliefs, and they're not usually true beliefs. They're usually false beliefs. They're usually limiting beliefs and stories, narratives that we tell ourselves about ourselves and about other people. And when we believe these stories and these beliefs about ourselves, we can't help but put that out into the world, and the world reflects back to us who we believe we are. So the idea in my business is to help my clients move past their trauma and abuse and the messaging that you got as a child, so that you can start thinking about yourself in a healthier way. When you start thinking about yourself in a healthier way, that changes a lot, because when you're thinking thoughts like, I'm not good enough, no one will ever love me, I'm not valuable, I'm not very important, it really, really stresses your body out, okay? It really stresses out your body and mind and soul, basically. And stress, as we know, is a direct factor in poor health. And we can have, obviously physical ailments, medical conditions, and diseases that arise from the stress we're under. It makes us age faster. It causes inflammation in our bodies, and our immune systems attack our bodies when we have a lot of stress hormones released into our systems. And so it sounds almost like, oh, how silly to stop thinking I'm not good enough, and then all of a sudden I'm not going to have cancer. But as you can see, the thoughts that you're telling yourself all the time do have that impact on your body. It causes you to go into a fight or flight response, which your body thinks, oh, you must be needing to run from a tiger. Let's get going. And I apologize for my dogs. I do have dogs who bark when I'm on calls. And so, that the downward effects of trauma from the stress do cause the physical problems. Now, also the having the thoughts of, I'm not pretty enough, I'm not smart enough, or I'm not worthy, really do take a toll on your life too, because you go into situations and working situations or relationships, let's say, and you can automatically think that, oh, I'm not good enough, I'm not going to get that promotion, I'm not smart enough, I won't be hired, or that woman won't love me, or that man won't like me because I'm not pretty enough, or I'm not thin enough, or blah, 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 enough, I'm not enough, or I'm too much, right? I'm too much. That's another message we sometimes get as children. So, my really strong belief is that we can heal our trauma from childhood. Trauma doesn't just go away, and the after effects of it don't just go away because we grow up into adulthood. The trauma that is created in ourselves is somatically installed into our bodies until we release it, and we don't release it until we are ready to release it. We have to know how to release it. We don't just release it because we're 30 and that happened when we were 3. it doesn't happen like that. You have this anchor trauma, the initial trauma that continues to kind of replay itself over and over in life. And it's very cumulative. And so over time, your body, your mind, everything starts believing this identity about yourself. And that identity is typically based in shame. And shame itself, actually, I'll start with shame, is when we're children and we're in abusive or traumatizing homes, it's a form of protection for us. That so that we won't be abused more. So shame will come in when you've been harmed in some way to say, oh, don't do this thing or do this thing so that mom or dad won't hit you again or yell at you or you won't get in trouble. You start doing something else. So usually you're not going to fight your parents. You're probably too afraid when you're little to fight your caregivers because you don't know if they're going to kill you or hurt you. You usually do something like fawn and please and appease and submit, or you might freeze or you might run away. Those are typically probably the things that children do the most. And shame says, be a good little girl. Help mom feel better so she won't yell at you or won't drink so much or won't hit you. Clean your room. Say please and thank you. Don't forget because you might get in trouble. So shame is powerful to help us survive. Shame becomes toxic over time because shame develops a life of its own. And when you're grown up, you still have the voices of shame creating that inner critic inside of you that's like, you better do it this way or they won't like you. And that's like debilitating for like a grown person, right? Because, grown-ups can usually take care of themselves, are very resourceful and resilient. But if you have this messaging that you've had like lodged in your body and in your mind since you were little, you're still going to act the way you did when you were that age. Okay. So, let's move into what trauma is. Okay. So trauma is defined as an individual's ability to cope with traumatic events. And it's the frequency of occurrences based on their personal, emotional, physical, mental, and spiritual resiliency. So it kind of depends on the child's caregivers to repair the rupture they cause. The parent doesn't go back and try to take care of the child's feelings or wounds after they've lashed out at the child. The attachment the child has to the parent is starting to rupture. And then the attachment to themselves starts to rupture. And so we'll get into attachment styles in another episode, but basically it can create a different kind of attachment style inside yourself because of the way your parent treated you if they didn't repair the damage. And validate feelings and apologize and make it better, right? So trauma is trapped in the body somatically, as I mentioned, and it does create that mounting shame and those limiting beliefs, which again are kind of like the inner critic or inner critics. You could have more than one, you can have many, and we can also get into that in another episode, having to do with the parts of us. But like I said earlier, a child will feel like they have to fight, flee, fawn, or freeze, and usually they probably won't fight back. They might try once or twice and might find that they get in more trouble. So that's usually one that kind of goes out the window when you're little. But when you grow up, you might start fighting. You might start arguing back. You might start actually fist fighting people if you haven't overcome the trauma and the trauma reaction that you're used to having. Okay. So if you never address, like I said, if you never address that anchor trauma or that initial trauma that you had, you are going to continue accumulating more and more experiences that reignite or trigger that initial trauma. And it's going to make you just think the worst about yourself and other people because the traumatized person, feels like they're powerless to control the circumstances. Or they feel like it was intensely frightening or perceived as like a moral injury. What can be perceived to a child as unfair or like an injustice. Okay. The traumatic events change the way a child thinks and believes about himself and the world, really. He starts to believe that he's a bad boy or not good enough. And and that, just like I said, it just stays with the child, with the child and then into adulthood if it's not healed. But the thing about trauma is this. Trauma is something that you get to decide if you were traumatized. I don't get to decide that for you. You get to decide that based on your own uh, experiences. So if something is traumatizing for me, but it's not to you, and you're looking at me like I'm just overreacting to something stupid, that's okay. My trauma to me is based on my own level of resiliency and my own sensitivity. So you can't lessen for me what my trauma means to me, and I can't do that for you either. The point is that if you feel like you were traumatized, that's all that matters. Now, the thing about parenting is this. Parents don't need to be perfect people, and they certainly make mistakes, and that is part of being human, and that's part of being a parent. Parents can be good enough parents, okay? And according to Pete Walker in his popular book, Complex PTSD, From Surviving to Thriving, they can be good enough. But the thing about parents who are good enough parents is they will apologize and make amends, and they will try to reestablish that attachment, repair that attachment with the child so the child can still feel loved and not feel like they're a bad child. Because that, like, again, that shame that's created, shame says, I am bad. Guilt says, I did bad, right? So shame as an identity is something that we like to work with when I work with you, because having that belief cemented in that says, I am bad because I talked back, or I am bad because I didn't say hello to that person. I am bad because I uh, didn't balance a checkbook the right way last month. It kind of seems silly because it's like, well, obviously you're not bad for that. But people believe they are bad, and then they have relationships with people who say, oh, you're a bad person, right? You're a bad person because you didn't think of me every second of the day in the way you should have, according to my laws and bylaws, it's not that you shouldn't think of people, because that's probably a good idea in a relationship, but it doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you human. I made mistakes. If you continue to carry on a pattern over and over again of just selfishness or being rude, that's not a good thing to do. And maybe over time, I guess you could cement into this idea that you're a bad person, but it's really still just a pattern that you can change. And so when we take the shame and make it into just guilt, oh, I did a bad thing. Can I forgive myself? Can I try not to do that again? Can I pay attention next time and be more aware of what I've done? Yes. Okay, I can do that. And so I did a bad thing and I forgive myself, and I'll ask the other person if they'll forgive me. I'll apologize. I'll own it, right? It's the ownership of the mistake and the changing the pattern and the mistake so you won't do it again that releases you, right? Because shame, people don't want to look at shame. And so when they don't look at shame, they won't take accountability for the bad things they do, because they don't want everyone in the world to know they're a bad person, which is what they think they are based on their trauma or based on their abuse. Okay. So if those people who feel a lot of shame would simply look at the situation, look at all the situations, which is hard to do, especially if you have a lot of mistakes you made and you've hurt a lot of people over time. But if they would do that, they could see that there's probably a pretty good reason that they did the thing they did. And they could probably find a way to forgive themselves, seek help, have somebody else in relationship with them help them through it, just help them see that they're not a bad person just because they've done some bad things. Then they could take ownership of what they've done, and then they could release it. That's a big ask for a lot of people, but it's a solution. It's part of a solution to healing in this world, okay, is that we could look at the things we've done and take it away from the I am shameful, I am bad, into I did a bad thing. Can I forgive myself and do better next time? That would really, really help a lot of people. I don't know if you agree with that or not. So, okay, now that's trauma. Okay. We're going to jump into abuse, and I'll go more into abuse in another episode, but I'll just give you a little overview. I looked at some statistics for 2024 on child abuse from the National Children's Alliance. And it said that 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 13 boys are abused. 1 billion children worldwide are sexually abused still. Now, neglect itself has gone down in the numbers, but many children are still maltreated and neglected of their basic food, clothing, and shelter needs, as well as their emotional needs, which would be like their nurturing, support, and love. They're abandoned emotionally and physically by their caregivers, which does set them up for lifelong psychological, relational, physical, and emotional struggles. Because as you can see, if your emotional needs, which are very important when you're a baby, you know, your emotional needs being neglected really impacts, again, the way you think about yourself. Because if you don't have your cries heard and your pains when you fall down validated, made to feel like you're going to be okay, mom or dad has you, then you grow up feeling like you're alone. You grow up and feel like you're not worth love. You're not worthy of good things. And again, that shame came in and said, oh, they're not going to take care of you when you bump your knee. So either cry and scream, and that would be a fight response. Though when the little kid cries and screams for more and more and more and more and more attention, because you never turn around and just say, do you need a kiss? Do you need me to hug you? Do you need a Band-Aid? What do you want mom to do? I love you. I want to take care of you. I know your knee's hurting. Let me help you. Mom or dad ignores that. Child feels, I really, really need attention. I need help. I'm bleeding all over the ground and I hurt and I'm crying. I need attention. And if they don't get attention that time, well, guess what? There's more and more and more attention-seeking behavior a child will have till the child's doing really, really negative things and maybe even illegal things and hurting other people, other children, their siblings, lying, just doing all kinds of like attention seeking behaviors because they just need attention. They just need some love and attention, the good kind. And if they don't get the good kind and they're neglected of it, they will start doing the not so good kind. Okay. And then they'll get labeled as a bad little girl or boy because all they want to do is get attention. And I don't have time for that. All it takes is 30 seconds or a minute or 5 minutes or whatever it is to help the child. And the child feels validated and loved. And then the child doesn't seek as much attention in that same way. Children always need attention. But again, if they get the attention when they're really struggling, even if to you, you're thinking, you literally just fell 12 inches because that's how tall you are to the ground, you're fine. When parents do that to their children, that is just absolutely the worst kind of abuse, in my opinion, because this poor little angel thinks he's in a lot of pain, and maybe he is, especially if he's bleeding, he's probably in pain. But even if he's not, and he's got big, huge crocodile tears running down his face, he still wants love. He just wants you to know that you're there to take care of him. When he went out on his own into the sandbox and then he fell, he went pretty far. He went like, 20 feet from you, and that's big for like a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old, okay? And he came back and he got hurt. And he's like, Mom, take care of me. And if your attitude is, oh, you're such a baby, stop crying. That's not fair to the baby because he is a baby and he gets to cry. Little boys especially do not deserve to be treated like they're babies when they're babies. That's what has happened to our men in this world is they didn't get to cry. They didn't get to be little boys who get to cry when they're little boys. They were sometimes taught, oh, he needs to be a man. Stop crying. How is a little baby, boy or girl, supposed to know how to stop crying when they don't even talk yet? That's the way they communicate their needs. And So many little boys especially are treated like they're pansies, or they're going to grow up and just like be like wimpy if they cry when they're 3 years old. And that is so unfair to baby boys. That is so unfair to our boys. I wish that we would stop doing that to our boys and to our girls, because a lot of girls are becoming masculinized, made into boys who should be action oriented and driven in the same way that men should be. And I'm not saying that women shouldn't go out there and do their thing. We all have masculine and feminine within us, but little girls are typically more often than not feminine. And that's not every girl, and that's not every boy. Like, there are girls who are more masculine in energy and boys who are more feminine in energy. But either way, if a child needs to cry when they're hurting, it's on the caregiver to support and love and nurture that child, feed that child, clothe that child, provide it security and safety and a shelter, right? Okay. So when children are abused, they learn 4 lies about themselves that form their self-concept and the way that they view the world, okay, and other people. They believe that they are to blame for their abuse. Believe that they're bad and unworthy of good things. They are shameful, and they are powerless. And now the powerless one locks in all these other 3 lies, and it keeps the child remaining safe in an abusive home. Again, that shame of, you need to be powerless by acknowledging or believing that you are worth less, that you are not worthy, that you are bad, because that's going to keep you alive. If you just stay small, hiding, and don't rock the boat, don't walk on eggshells, you'll stay safe and you'll stay alive. And when you are a child, you try to control your environment as best you can. And you have a primitive brain. Your brain has not developed a lot yet. And so you're living like an animal, right? Whatever, animals know how to survive. They have instincts, right? And this is what children have. They have instincts to stay alive. And if they need to pretzel themselves and please, or hide, or run away, or just freeze in order to stay safe and alive, that's what their body's going to do. And again, you'll grow up behaving in that same way when you are an adult, because unless you heal it, you can heal it for sure. That's what I do in my job every day. But it doesn't just change because, people grow up and they say, well, I'm an adult. My parents did the best they could. And I'm fine. I'm fine. Okay. Parents did the best they could. They may have abused you. They may have just wounded you. They may have, because people don't know what they're doing, basically. We're all orphans on this planet. And, we're all just doing what the collective society says we should do in order to parent. So we've all been just doing the best we can. The best we can may have been okay, or it may have been pretty dang bad, depending on which generation you grew up in. But it doesn't, they did the best they could, right, with what they had. And that's true. However, that doesn't take away from the fact that you were wounded and you were traumatized or you were abused. And so the more we deny in ourselves what happened to us, the less we heal. So we have to acknowledge, sure, mom and dad did the best they could. However, I also was hurt. And how am I going to take care of my side of the street now? Because it did impact me. And when I don't change that, I transfer that to my children and to other generations. And if you want to be the one who stops the generational trauma, you can do that by healing. And then you have a less likely chance of transferring onto your children, who then will transfer to their children. Each generation has the opportunity to get better than the last one. And so this is your opportunity now, because this is when it's happening. We have a lot of people out here trying to help heal trauma and abuse, okay? There are different kinds of abuse, which again, we will go into in another episode. But we have emotional, we have physical, we have verbal, there's financial abuse, there is sexual abuse, religious abuse or spiritual abuse. We also have neglect, as I mentioned, and trafficking. So in another amazing book that I recommend to a lot of people that I love is it's a book by Dr. Lindsay Gibson. It's Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents. It's a very, very good book. I think it can help a lot of people right now. If you would read that book, it's just really, really great. Um, so when children are neglected by their parents or abused, they can, again, grow to not believe or trust in themselves. They believe that they're not worthy, right? So people who are abusing their children are not validating their children's feelings. And then children don't know how to believe in themselves or trust themselves, and they start looking outside at other people for validation and to make their decisions and help them learn to trust themselves because they don't trust themselves, or they just simply give up. It's like a learned helplessness. Like, I don't know things, so you decide for me. I'll just be over here being quiet and you tell me what to do. And if you've ever had that experience, I don't know if you've ever had that experience, but when you give enough people in the world power over you, they will take advantage of that, and they will start bossing you around and telling you that you're not worth anything and that you're too stupid to figure out your own life. And here, let me do it for you. And you're just kind of led around like, okay, I'll just do whatever you say. I'll believe you, even if you're lying to me, and I'll trust you, even if you're hurting me, because I probably have it wrong. You're probably not doing what I think you're doing, or I would probably just have a hard time doing things on my own. So I'll let you just do the things and I'll just go ahead and like sit here and believe you, even if they're hurting you. So I don't know if you've ever had that experience, but that is one sure way to lose yourself. And I can tell you that losing yourself is dangerous. Dangerous. I'm not even just saying it. It is dangerous. You give all your power away to your partner, your parent, your coworkers, your friends, your boss, whoever it is. I know your boss has to have some power over you, but you give all of that away, even to your children. You are going to lose yourself. And I am here to tell you it is hard coming back to that, from that, because you don't really know who you were to begin with. And often we're in relationships in our adult life based on what we were dealing with as children. So we're already used to being treated that way, already used to like not knowing or trusting ourselves, right? And so we grow up and we find relationships that are the same. And so it's like going from one thing to the other, and we never really stop to go, wait a second, who am I? You know, some people don't know how to answer that question. Like, ask yourself that question. Who am I? If I said to you, who are you? What would you tell me? Do you know who you are? If you do, you're lucky, but a lot of people don't know who they are. They literally don't know who they are. They're like, I don't know, a woman, a cat lover, and they're question marking it. Like, a coach? I don't know. I'm not much. Well, so that's an important question, because I bet you're more than all that, you know, and I bet if you looked at yourself and really asked yourself, maybe wrote that down, you might discover a lot. You might have a longer list than you think. And I think you'd probably be pretty, you know, interested in that, curious about that. I don't know if you'd be happy about it. I don't know if you'd even believe it, because you'd have to receive that. And often when we're in abusive homes, we can't receive love because we never did. We were never taught that we're lovable. So we don't believe that we would be able to receive love from somebody or give it. You know, we could probably give it. Yeah. A lot of us can give love real well. It may not be true love because it's based on trauma and fawning, and it's more of a people pleasing thing, which can kind of be manipulative, and it's probably going to trigger some people when I say that. But if you think about it, as a child, you learned you had to fawn, you had to please, and you had to do it their way in order to get love, protection, and all the things you needed. So even though it's not a malicious form of manipulation, it is. It's like, I am going to control and manipulate you so you take care of me, right? And this is kind of where codependency is born from as well. So, you know, really, when we can say, I receive love, I love myself, because that's the place it starts, then we can really be impactful in the world in terms of, you know, trusting ourselves, knowing who we are, knowing what we're going to put up with, having like internal boundaries, a safe haven inside ourselves, and then be able to speak our boundaries, our truth, and things like that. But when we are children who have come from abusive homes, we definitely do not always have that faith and trust and belief in ourselves. Um, so when you're taught to discount your own feelings, you really don't know when your emotional cup is full, and you won't be able to know where that line is. So you ask for what you want and you kind of stab in the dark for it, since you don't quite know what you need, but you can kind of tell that you don't have whatever it is. But then you might feel immediately guilty or ashamed for even asking for something that you need from, this is like if you're like grown up, and even when you're a child, you might get laughed at if you ask for a hug, or, um, you want to just be comforted by your parent and they are like too busy, or they roll their eyes at you and they ridicule you or mock you for your loving nature. That's very, very painful for a child, as you can imagine. And if it happened to you, then I'm sure you already do know. So, when you grow up and you've had this experience, you might think, why do I need to, like, what am I complaining about? So many people in so many other places in this world have far worse than I do. I have all my basic needs. I'm not starving like other people are in this world. I'm not abused every single day. I'm not, a slave, a sex trafficked person. I have a pretty good life, right? So why am I going to pull up crap that happened to me 30 years ago, 50 years ago? Because even if you are okay and surviving right now, that doesn't necessarily mean you're thriving. You're doing the daily grind. You've got the person you settled with because they fit the bill. They crossed off the marks. You marked off the checks. I can't think of the words, but they ticked off the boxes. That's it. You're not happy. You're not really in love. You don't really have like a connection that's loving, or, your sex drive is gone. You don't have a relationship that's connected that way. You don't have, you might fight, or you might just ignore each other. You don't fight anymore. You just don't even care anymore. You're just there paying the bills together and doing the life. And you're thinking, well, it could be worse. I mean, it could be alone, which I don't think is necessarily worse. I really don't. I think it's actually better. Because, that person that you're with, both of you are bringing each other really down into like a lower vibration, just because you're simply doing the thing, but you're not happy. You're not joyful. You're not excited to see each other necessarily. You're not in love with each other. You're doing the day-to-day thing and you're just wasting your entire life. Right. And so, when we look at it and we go, well, I mean, I could be worse. I could be alone. I could be, in a really super abusive relationship with this person. And maybe they're not abusing you. Maybe they're kind of abusing you. Maybe they're just ignoring you. Neglecting you is still abuse, right? Or they could be gaslighting you. They could be controlling your money or controlling you in some way or not letting you have friends. That's emotional abuse. They could be calling you names sometimes, or saying you're not worthy or that you're stupid. That's verbal abuse. And just because they're not hitting you doesn't mean they're not abusing you. So anything that they're doing could be considered sort of abusive, right? And that is taking a toll on your health, your mental, your physical, your emotional health, and your spiritual health. Okay. So, why not look at like what caused you to get to where you are now? Because maybe it was something that happened a long time ago in another relationship or in your childhood that you could heal from. And then decide, am I really happy in this situation? Whether that's the job you're in that you've been doing for 40 years that you hate but pays the bills, the relationship with the, neglectful partner, or you're neglectful to the partner too, I mean, both of you, or, you're just in a friendship group that is just not happy and not fun for you. And so, you know, it might help just because you have some of those needs met, like physical needs and financial needs does not mean you have your emotional needs met. And I think life is too short for that. What do you guys think? Like, life's too short to be unhappy. And I know people stay in relationships because they're afraid to be alone. And I know that's one of the biggest reasons. And if you have financial considerations, financial tie-ins there with the person, that can be scary because, you could lose a lot of your money or whatever. I know it's not easy. I'm not saying everybody go get a divorce or like leave your partner right now. I'm just saying on the other side of that could be something way better for you, could be something way happier for you, even if you're alone. And sometimes being alone is exactly what we need, because sometimes we never have been alone since we were little. We've gone from family to boyfriend or girlfriend to marriage or partnership, and never were alone for long enough to realize we could actually be okay alone and really learn to love who we are and trust who we are, so that we can avoid going into the red flaggy relationships or jobs, and have boundaries faster, speak our truth sooner, things like that. And when we can do that and we can be okay alone, then we're free, right? We're free. And then we get to have somebody come into our life who we really want to be with, based on the fact that we love ourselves so much that we won't tolerate anyone who's going to treat us less than we deserve, because we'll know our worth then. Does that make sense? So, you know, so basically, like, the bottom line is, when we can move past the trauma or abuse cycling, because it is cycling, and we know our patterns, we can choose better. We can just choose better, right? We can choose our loved ones better. We can choose our happiness, our fulfillment better, the activities we want to really be doing. And it could take both people in a relationship to work on themselves to help the relationship thrive and flourish, right? Or it can be, I'm going to do my stuff. And if it looks like we're going to connect and like get closer, and you're going to like do your stuff, wow, it'll work. And if it's not, then maybe it won't work. But I won't know until I've done my part to heal my stuff. And you won't know until you've done your stuff, whether we're really compatible like we thought. Because sometimes we are brought together with people who we think we're compatible with, or who we are compatible with at the time. And then it can change later. And that's sad. I know. I'm not saying like, oh, everyone go break up with your person right now. I would never encourage anyone to break up with their partners. It's just, what I do encourage is love, self-love. And when we love ourselves and we know for the first time ever that we are worthy and that we are valuable and important, at least to ourselves, it really changes the way we relate to other people. And sometimes those people have to fall by the wayside, the ones who we've attracted in our other less healed state. Okay. So I hope this first episode has been helpful. Just wanted to give you a little intro to, what I do, what I think is important, and what trauma and abuse are. Um, Blooming into you really does fit, because it's about becoming the very best version, the very highest version of who you are, and living out that version on this planet at this time, which I think is really, really key for creating more of like a world peace. It may not seem like that could happen. I know not a lot of people, but there have been people in my life who are like, you're a little too idealistic, or what do you think, why do you think that could happen? That sounds so like utopian or something. I do believe it's possible, because I've gone through the motions myself in my life, and I have healed things that happened to me in my life, and I'm still healing, because there's no such thing as you're done healing, because we're human and there's always going to be stuff that comes up. But I have a stronger awareness of who I am now than I've ever had. I have a stronger connection with my conscious and my unconscious minds, and I know I'm more in alignment with who I am and what I really want in my life. And I did work to heal that. I had to look at the beliefs I've had about myself since I was a little kid, and actively change those beliefs, because the truth of who you are is your highest version of who you are, not the lies you tell yourself about yourself or that you were, imprinted with as a child. Those were things that happened to you as a result of being traumatized and as a result of shame coming in to protect you. That's not true. That's not truth, right? That's not true about you. That was what you needed to survive as a child. Now you're an adult, and guess what? You get to change the way you think about yourself anytime you want. And I'm not going to sit here and say it's easy, but it is possible, and it is fun. That's the other thing. It's fun. It really is. Like I do this work with my clients. I love, love, love to uncover my clients' beliefs about themselves that are holding them back. Because as soon as we see those beliefs, they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't know I thought that about myself, but I kind of knew. I mean, my life sort of acts like that. My life shows up as I'm not really worthy, but unconsciously I know I'm worthy, right? So consciously your mind wants you to be happy, right? But unconsciously is where everything happens. That's where the bus is driven, from, you know, the little kid who was 5 years old and got the message he's a bad little boy drives your life, right? He's the one in charge. So we want to talk to that little guy. We want to get in touch with that little guy and help him understand he doesn't have to do this anymore. That's a big job for a 5-year-old to be driving a bus because 5-year-olds don't have licenses and they're not tall enough to drive a bus. So they don't have the tools and the skills to do grown up things, yet they're doing your life. They're acting on your behalf. So you're acting a lot of times from your 5-year-old self. And so when you change that and you want to act like from your 35-year-old self, yeah, that's a little bit better because that 35-year-old knows a lot more than the 5-year-old does. But the 35-year-old lives from a conscious place. 5-year-old lives from a subconscious place. So we want the 5-year-old and 35-year-old to meet up. And the 35-year-old can talk to the 5-year-old and be like, hey, dude, cool. Thank you so much for all your help all this time. I got it now. And I'm going to let you go do what 5-year-olds do. Swing, play, run around, play kickball, hide and seek, do fun things, play with your trucks. And I, the 35-year-old man, am going to now continue living as a 35-year-old man who's resilient and resourceful and can do like adult things, okay? Adult responsible good things and make the money and raise the family and love the wife and all that. So I hope this helps. And yeah, I will look forward to speaking with you guys next time. This is my first solo endeavor, and I will also have guests. And I used to do a podcast, Try Self Love, with my lovely friend and coach, Becky Barber. We did many, many episodes, many, I guess 50. That's a lot compared to how many people do these days. But we did about 50 episodes or so. And you can check those out on Try Self Love if you want to hear that. But this is my like solo thing. But in a few weeks, I'm going to have Becky come on and we'll do one for old time's sake little podcast. And I will have other guests on here and there too. So it won't just be me rambling at you all the time. But yeah, I hope that you've enjoyed this episode. And I still look forward to talking again with you next time. And I hope that you will remember that blooming into yourself and coming home to your true self is really, really important. And it's freeing and it builds confidence and security in yourself. And it is absolutely wonderful for having actually the life that you want to have. And so move past your trauma and abuse into a recovered space. And you'll see that the truth of who you are as your highest version is right there. And he or she's been there all along, ready for you to come home to yourself. So I hope this helps and have a great day.